Real ponies don't go oink. Even when we were small boys, Crazy Eddie Muldoon and I were gnawed by that terrible hunger, known to nearly every boy in that distant time, the hunger for our very own pony to ride. We dreamed the impossible dream. On our next birthday, or surely the one after, we would awaken to hear our beaming parents gush, "Guess what's tied up out behind the woodshed, son? But before you rush off to see what it is, you'd better open this present that's in the shape of a saddle." Sure enough, the present would be a saddle. Then you would tear out of the house, and there, hidden behind the woodshed, probably with a big bow around its neck, would be your very own pony. You would saddle up your pony and gallop off toward the horizon, pausing only long enough to wave at your generous and thoughtful and loving parents, the very best parents in the whole world. My family wasn't big on impossible dreams. "Would you shut up about a pony?" my mother roared every time I brought up the topic. "Ponies cost money. You think money grows on trees?" Occasionally, I would ride one of our pigs by the kitchen window, hoping to shame Mom into buying me a pony. "There goes old Short in the saddle," my sister, the troll, would shout. "Hop along, Hog, and Gene Oink, the smelly cowboy." Then she and Mom would have a good laugh. Their response didn't leave me much hope of ever getting my very own pony by appealing to sympathy. Crazy Eddie fared scarcely better. "Would you shut up about a pony?" Mr. Muldoon would roar. "Ponies cost money. You think money grows on trees?" Still, the Muldoons had an actual farm, with cows, sheep, pigs, chickens, rabbits, and even a goat, which, by the way, wasn't a bad ride. A pony would have fit right into the Muldoon menagerie. If you stared hard enough at their pasture, you could easily imagine a pony out there. You could almost see it, in fact, and one morning I did see it. Galloping majestically across the pasture was, forget the dumb pony, a beautiful, huge, glistening black horse. Eddie was riding the horse. It was almost too much for me to bear. True, Eddie didn't exactly fit my idea of a cowboy. The horse's back was so broad that Eddie's stubby legs stuck straight out on either side, as if he were doing an equestrian version of the splits. Eddie and the horse were totally out of aesthetic proportion to each other. From a distance, the two of them looked like a mouse riding a tall dog, although I knew the image would hurt Eddie's feelings. "You look like a mouse riding a tall dog," I called out to him. Eddie galloped over, reined in right next to me, and glared down. He had to lean out precariously in order to see over the curve of the horse's barrel-shaped belly. "You're just jealous," Eddie said. "I bet you want to ride." "No," I said. "I'm expecting my own pony any day now. I'll wait and ride it." "If you climb up the barbed wire and stand on top of that fence post, I'll pull you up," Eddie said. "Okay," I said. I climbed the post, and Eddie hauled me up behind him. The view was wonderful from up there. You could see practically forever. The two of us rode off singing "Back in the Saddle Again," even though this was only our first time in the saddle. Our legs jutted straight out to the side, so there was no reason to argue about who got to use the stirrups. Actually, doing the splits while trotting about on horseback isn't nearly as painful as it sounds. Excruciating? Yes, but scarcely more uncomfortable than that. Cowboys are tough. It turned out that old Tom, the horse, had recently been destined for another existence in the form of fox food. One of the farmers up the road raised foxes for their furs, and many a worn-out horse ended up there as the luncheon special. Apparently, the farmer had an excess of fox food for the moment, and asked Eddie's father if he had use for a horse. Mr. Muldoon said he could probably think of one if he put his mind to it. Old Tom had already done a little time at the fox farm, and while exhausting the appeals process, had got religion. He had been a bad horse, even a wicked horse, and his former owner had finally got fed up with his behavior and sent him up the road. His first week at the Muldoons, Tom was still figuratively wiping the sweat from his brow over his narrow escape from a career as fox food. You couldn't have asked for a sweeter, gentler horse for two little boys. After a week or two, however, old Tom apparently forgot his last-minute reprieve. He got it into his head that he had always lived at the Muldoon farm, and furthermore probably owned it. He soon relapsed to his former nasty self. Hardly a day went by that he didn't buck us off. While we tried to get his bridle on, he would casually place a hoof on one of my feet. Then he would put all his weight on that one hoof, balancing there, with daylight showing between the ground and his other 3 hooves. I would be yelling and thrashing about, and Tom would nonchalantly turn his head and look back, as if wondering what all the ruckus was about. Eddie would be trying to get the bridle over Tom's ears, and the horse would suddenly jerk his head up and send Eddie flying. Old Tom was wearing us out. He finally became so haughty, he decided he didn't want to be ridden at all. Practically every day, carrying his bridle, we trailed Tom from one end of the farm to the other and back again, but almost never caught him. Then Eddie came up with the idea of roping the horse when it came to get a drink from the watering trough. First, though, we needed to find a rope. Eddie's father had been putting a new layer of shingles on the barn and had bought a long rope that he tied to a big, thick belt around his waist. He fastened the other end of the rope to a tractor, then climbed up a ladder and worked his way up over the steep roof of the barn to the far side, where the rope held him in place while he worked on the shingles. We found the rope neatly coiled by the tractor with the belt resting on top of the coil. Mr. Muldoon must have been taking a coffee break in the house because he was nowhere in sight. Eddie looked this way and that, and then said he didn't think his pa would mind our using the rope to lasso old Tom. "I wish Pa was a cowboy or rancher instead of just a farmer," Eddie said, grunting as he hoisted the big coil of rope and draped it over his shoulder. "Or a professional baseball player. That'd be good. But he's just so ordinary. All he does is dumb things like put new shingles on the barn. It's sort of embarrassing." "Yeah," I said, trying to sound sympathetic, as though my family were interesting. I suggested to Eddie that we cut off a piece of rope long enough for a lariat, but Eddie said no, it might make his pa mad. He said it would be better if we used the whole rope and just tied a loop in one end. He hauled all the rope out to the watering trough, tied a loop, and climbed up on the corral fence above the trough. The excess rope was scattered about the barnyard behind us in coils and assorted snarls. Presently, Tom came moseying out of the pasture and headed for the trough. He stopped and eyed us suspiciously. Satisfied that he could handle anything we might have thought up for him, he plodded on in. "What are you boys up to now?" growled Mr. Muldoon, coming behind us. Startled, we both jumped. "Nothing, Pa," Eddie said. "Why?" "Why? Well, because you got my new safety rope snarled all over the barnyard, that's why." "Sorry, Pa," Eddie said, turning his attention back to Tom. The horse was dipping its muzzle into the trough. "We're just trying to catch old Tom." "He's a lazy beast," Mr. Muldoon said. Both Eddie and I were intently watching old Tom. It was only much later that we learned Mr. Muldoon had picked up his safety belt and strapped it on. "I'd help you catch him, son, but I gotta get this barn shingled before it starts to rain." "That's okay, Pa," Eddie said. "I think we just about got him." Mr. Muldoon started untangling the safety rope and forming it into a coil on the ground. Tom lifted his dripping muzzle from the trough and glared up at us, his ears flattened back against his head. Eddie tossed the lasso around his neck and jerked it tight. The horse reared up, pawed the air, and whinnied angrily. Then it bolted for the pasture. The rope sizzled through Eddie's hands. "Ow!" he cried, jerking away. "That burns!" "Now, what's got into old Tom?" Mr. Muldoon said, looking up from his coil of rope. "Stupid horse!" "I lassoed him," Eddie explained. "You did," Mr. Muldoon said, "with All the loops and turns and tangles of rope slithered this way and that, and then snapped straight out toward the pasture. The coil at Mr. Muldoon's feet disappeared like a giant strand of spaghetti slurped from a plate. In that instant, Mr. Muldoon took the longest step I'd ever seen anyone take in my life. He must have stepped a good 30 feet from takeoff to touchdown. Both Eddie and I were impressed. "Wow!" Eddie cried. "Did you see that? Holy smokes! And look at Pa go now. I never knew he could run so fast. He must be trying to help us catch old Tom." He sounded so pleased and proud that I couldn't help but envy him. Eddie obviously had the fastest father in the county, maybe in the whole country, or even the world. Old Tom must have been surprised, too, and even terrified, when he saw Mr. Muldoon racing after him at such amazing speed for a mere human. Tom kicked up his heels, stretched out, and ran even harder as if his life depended on it, which, as we later learned, it did. Eddie and I watched until his pa and Tom disappeared into the creek bottom, both of them practically flying. As far as we could judge, though, Mr. Muldoon wasn't gaining an inch on the horse. "Shucks," Eddie said. "Pa ain't ever going to catch Tom just by chasing him. He should know better. A horse can outrun a man every time, even one as fast as Pa." "Hard to say," I said. "Your Pa was really moving. I bet if he wasn't wearing his big old clodhopper boots, he could." "Maybe," Eddie said. "But there's no point in us waiting around for them to get back. We might as well go do something else. You got any ideas?" "We could go ride your pigs," I said. "To tell you the truth, I'm kind of sick of horses." "Yeah, me too," Eddie said. "So which pig you want to ride, Trigger or Champ?"